Welcome to On Point. My name is Brett Teal, and today we'll be discussing the role of performance-enhancing drugs and the historical impact they have on sports. Joining us today is a former pro football player who's going to take us inside an NFL locker room. This is Brett Miller. He played football from 1983 to 1992. And Brett, first, we often hear that football teams are like a family. Did you find this to be true?
I think all sports organizations are like a family, and the higher in level you go, the more like a family they are. And it's a very unique situation because you have people from all over the country in all walks of life that are thrown into this mix, and they have to work together. And the only way to do that is to be able to trust each other and act like a family.
So take us inside the locker room. Did players talk about steroid use often when you were playing?
No, it wasn't a topic of conversation. It was, it just wasn't really talked about. It wasn't an issue. It just, if it was there, it was. If it wasn't, it wasn't something, hey, what's going on over there, or what's going on over there. It was, people were concerned about the game, more about the game than about the peripheral things.
In your estimation, during your playing days, how many players would you say were using during that time?
Oh, I don't know, Brett. You're asking me such a specific question. I don't think that anybody really knows. I don't think anybody could answer that. I know that there's been a lot of speculation, and it goes from decade to decade as to the percentage of use. So I think it'd be very difficult. Somebody would be very hard pressed, to come up with an accurate number.
And I know that you said it wasn't discussed, but were you aware of teammates who were using?
Well, define aware for me, because were they walking around in the locker rooms giving each other shots? No. Was it? It was just, you just kind of know what's going on, not based on rumor or whispers or finger pointing, but there's certain things that are associated with the game and part of the game, and not just football. All sports. When you get to that level, people are usually willing to do things that are above and beyond what the ordinary individual would do for success, because the competition is so fierce.
And what role did the owners and the organizations have in steroids? Did they condone it?
I think that they turned kind of a blind eye. I'm not real familiar with the world of horse racing, but you can kind of compare the two. Athletes at that level that are getting paid millions of dollars a year are commodities, and the salaries have continued to increase based on the television revenues that the owners have, and that goes across the board for sports. So I don't think, I really hesitate to say that there is a genuine, heartfelt concern for the athletes by the owners.
And we often talked about the media. When you were playing, there was a point where there was no media allowed in the locker room, and that changed. Do you think that had a role in public perception on steroids?
I don't think so. And, the media was allowed, but they were allowed very little time, and there was a specific time they were allowed in, and they had to be out. We could be off. We got off the field. We had some time to collect ourselves, talk what was going on, and then they were let in for about 5 minutes, I think, and then they had to go. Excuse me. As time progressed, they were given more and more access, which I know none of the players liked it, because we all felt that access to a professional sports locker room had to be earned. And it was kind of like a haven where we could go, where we wouldn't be bothered and we could talk freely. I think I told you before, there was a sign above both exits. What you say here, what you see here, what you hear here, stays here when you leave here. So it's, if you want to go back to the family aspect of it, you just don't talk about your family's business outside of your family. So,
in baseball, we've seen that Mark McGwire, he admitted to using steroids, and after returning back for a press conference, he was cheered. Do you think that fans really care what players are doing, or, like I said, is it an issue of the people writing about sports caring more than the fans?
Well, media, as you know, thrives on controversy. You don't see newspapers being sold that are reporting good news. It's always a disaster, whether it's world finance, the earthquake in Haiti. So I think that the media thrives on controversy. I think that they probably have promoted it a little bit, and made it and brought it to the forefront. I just don't understand. I don't understand why fans of sports take it so personally, like they've been ripped off. I don't get it. Maybe you could tell me.
Do you think that regarding that the media, we idolize these athletes so much and put them on a pedestal that we are creating unrealistic expectations, and that we don't realize that, hey, these are humans capable of making mistakes? Would you agree with that?
I think everybody's capable of mistakes, especially professional athletes. They are on a pedestal and they are role models, and I'm a firm believer in being held accountable for the things that you do as an athlete. So it's kind of a double-edged sword for those guys. I think that you should be a role model. I think that illegal drug penalties should be enforced. I think that some of the problems that these professional athletes are getting into now with regards to guns and some other issues that I don't really need to mention, you are a role model, and kids try and emulate the behavior of professional athletes, whatever sport it may be. But with going back to the steroid thing or performance-enhancing drugs, I don't think it's really anybody's business.
Going off of punishments in criminal prosecution, we've seen that Miguel Tejada and Barry Bonds have been pursued on perjury charges. Do you think that we should be spending time trying to criminally prosecute these people related to what they've done in a game?
I don't know. I think there's a lot more important issues that should be taken care of, before we start spending tax dollars prosecuting an athlete for something that he may have or may have not done.
And going off tax dollars, we've seen Congress, they've gotten involved in the steroid issue, holding congressional hearings, grand jury testimony, and even the Mitchell report in baseball, which looked for possible solutions. Do you think that this is an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars?
I do. I mean, I don't see the government going to IBM and drug testing their employees. I don't see them doing reports on whether or not somebody over at CNN is doing something. Professional sports is a private industry, and I don't know what role the government thinks that they are entitled to play in managing a privately run business.
Back to your playing days, do you think there's anything that the owners and coaches should have done to sort of curb steroid use?
I don't think there's anything they could have done. The performance-enhancing drugs, it's not only in professional sports, it's in amateur sports as well, as we've talked about, and that's a whole new issue. I mean, how do you define professional versus amateur sports? Do you do it by the book and just say, well, if an athlete's being paid money to do his job, then he's a professional, and if he's being sponsored and not technically being paid money, then he's an amateur? I kind of define a professional athlete as the best in the world. So whether you are defined as an amateur athlete or a professional athlete, I think the stakes are so high and there's so much to be gained, and the line is so fine between a champion and an also-ran that at that level, the commitment required to attain success in professional sports or amateur sports kind of influences the athlete's decision to do whatever it takes to be successful.